Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our webinar Wednesday. My name is Joe O'Donnell, and of course, with us we have Betty Nelson. And our guest speaker today is Emilio Flores from our eDiscovery and forensic team. And myself, I am the senior technician here at Terrapin and instructor. And Betty, what is it that you do?
What is it that I do? I am the practice support coordinator.
Very good. And Emilio, you're in with us here. You want to introduce yourself? Hopefully your microphone is working for you. And let's try that again. Emilio, can you see if you can unlock your mic? I apologize. The permission security settings were a little too high. You should be able to unmute your microphone now.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
We can. Thanks a lot, buddy.
So I am on the eDiscovery and forensics team with Terrapin Technology. I've been a senior technical engineer with Terrapin for coming up to 10 years this year.
Very good. Well, it's good to have you with us and joining us with our webinar today. So as you can all see, we have a really good topic today that both Betty and Emilio are going to be discussing with us. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in with it. And as normal, we're going to go ahead and turn off our cameras so we don't distract you with our handsomely and gorgeous good looks. And we'll jump right into our discussion. And this is something that is been coming up quite frequently with our team, and the different services are available. But this eDiscovery is something that's very, very interesting. Emilio, why don't you explain what eDiscovery is? How do you explain that?
That's a good question. So to start off, eDiscovery is eDiscovery software allows legal professionals to process, review, tag, and produce electronic documents as part of a lawsuit or an investigation. eDiscovery is a process that's applied to electronically stored information, ESI, such as emails, computer files, databases, etc.
Interesting. Now, that all sounds really good, but the question usually comes up, I would say, is most of our clients usually have someone on staff that normally handles that work, right?
Not all of the time, but sometimes, yes.
So, Betty, you've had to work with a few of these what we called in-house warriors before, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's always been, a very important part of a firm that has a litigation practice to have somebody on their staff, whether they are a paralegal or called lit support, which are very similar roles, but there's usually someone who feels like it is their sole duty to manage the discovery in a matter. And, we just have to remember 15 years back, that meant banker boxes of documents where they sat alone in a war room and tagged them after reading them and touching every page. And now it's a much more electronic process. And I know it's hard for them to want to give up complete control. But there's reasons these days because of the scope of the eDiscovery has gotten so large. Emilio, you've probably worked with people like this when you worked in the law firm yourself. Why don't you explain a little bit about your work and how it led you to decide to become certified with eDiscovery software?
Yeah, so originally I started with a law firm, a litigation law firm, and I kind of helped the paralegals with some of their processes, as well as going to trials and setting up for arbitration and just miscellaneous tasks like that. And so coming into Terrapin and starting this eDiscovery portion has kind of just brought me right back into that, where I'm using some of the tools and methods that I learned from working at a law firm for 10 years.
Yep.
Now, doing eDiscovery is not not for faint of heart, right, Emilio? I mean, it does take a lot of work, and let's don't get sidetracked on that. It is a lot of work, but it can be a tough decision on whether or not with eDiscovery being kind of an accepted component of practicing law now, of what you're going to do. What's settled is whether, or I should say, what is not settled, however, is whether law firms should handle electronic stored information, or I think you had mentioned this term, ESI, which is the acronym that's used in that arena, is going to happen in-house, or whether they should outsource it. And there's really no, rule to answer that question, because the answer can vary depending on the needs and the resources of what the case is, your firm, your resources, and whatnot. So that's what we want to kind of look at, is the pros and cons of doing this type of work. So here is kind of a matrix, and thank you, a little shout out to Betty on putting this together on the pros and cons of doing in-house eDiscovery. And these are the main things that we see, we are talking with Emilio, that come across very, very frequently. Now, Emilio, is there anything you want to add to this list, or maybe expand on, that you see? Oh, and I think we may have lost Emilio. Oh, there he is. He's back.
I was on mute.
No worries.
No, the only thing that I kind of like to throw out there is that if you've got a secretary that's juggling multiple attorneys, and you're also trying to have her or them complete some of these eDiscovery processes, sometimes they miss things, or sometimes work gets jumbled up. And so having a third party take care of it, well, you can build a client for this work, and allow us to take care of the process for you, while your paralegals and legal secretaries can continue with their normal business.
I think I remember one thing that came out of our discussion, when we were talking about this subject, is like 9 times out of 10, it ends up in the beginning seeming very simple, of I just need this or that. And then later on, it ends up being something a whole lot more complex. And as a result, there seems to be a lot of duplication of work or effort. And that happens frequently, right?
Yeah, I noticed that a lot. And sometimes what'll happen is, attorneys will give the paralegals a little bit of information, and they may not know the full scope of work, or full scope of what needs to be produced. And so they'll start down the rabbit hole, and it turns into, a mess. And then we have to come in and end up starting over. It's happened a few times on a couple large cases.
Yeah.
They started off collecting maybe 1 or 2 gigs of information, and then next thing they know, now they're at a terabyte, and they're trying to review all this manually by, page by page. And, the attorneys may not know that there's software out there that'll help them with this.
Sure.
So when we put that in front of them, they love it.
Now, there is one little thing that's mentioned in here, and it's easy just to kind of go right by it. And it's listed on the in-house eDiscovery, but it's an important part, I think, on both sides, which is maintaining control of the data. Whether you're doing it in-house or not, that's an important aspect of maintaining that control, correct?
Yeah, I would say so. Most law firms like to keep their data on-prem, and or with a trusted vendor. A lot of our clients, we back that data up for them, or have full access to that, because we've worked with them for several years. Keeping us in the loop on this, keeps that trust, and with the clients rather than going to a third-party vendor that they don't know, they've never worked with. Who knows where it's stored at, who has access to it, if there's been any breaches, et cetera.
Right. Now, you had also mentioned, and I'll just kind of go to our next slide here and just kind of talk about this. Betty, you found this. This is just a fantastic illustration of what really happens. You want to throw your insight on this?
I do. This is exactly how it used to be. In some situations, it still looks like this. It's like, here's all your data, it's secure. We don't really live in that world anymore. I mean, data is either going to be in the cloud or on your server or on Terrapin server. It's on someone's server. And I think historically, what I saw in all the years that I helped with this process is that you realize what you're dealing with is too much for your firm to handle, but you were to go and talk to what I would call traditional e-discovery vendors, the big players in San Francisco. They sound very competent and they can handle every single aspect of the process, but the cost is astronomical. And not only that, when you go to select a vendor, they're really smart. They all have their own proprietary language, which makes it nearly impossible to compare quotes. We eliminate all of that at Terrapin. So I just want to make sure they understand, as of now, if you work with Terrapin, you have a new option, a completely different option. And that's what I'm excited about.
Thank you. So Emilio, you went through and you're working with clients and they're asking for options to work with this. I think our next slide just talks about using iPro. How did you decide to go with iPro and why? What was the key part in using this for your e-discovery process?
So Terrapin works with many law firms, small, medium, large, and we were in a unique position to see the pain points that came up during the e-discovery process. After a thorough review of eDiscovery software options, Terrapin decided to purchase and host iPro Eclipse for our clients and host the data on our secure servers.
Nice. Now, so we have this hosted system. So what does that allow for firms that want to take advantage of using iPro or our hosted iPro? What advantage does that give them?
It gives them the ability to keep their hands on, in the experience. We keep them in the loop, and they still continue to have access to the data and the ability to work with us. The same way we always work with them, right? There's not really a change there.
I just wanted to jump in and say what I love about this option is that most small or medium-sized firms are really leery about making an investment in e-discovery software themselves. First of all, it's expensive. And secondly, it can, the game can change in a matter of 5 to 10 years, making you worried that, or am I making this investment with this product toward the end of their life cycle? Is this going to be around for a while? But they definitely want their firm members, their paralegals, to have the hands-on experience, be able to review the documents, tag the documents. And that's what we afford by hosting the data and giving them access through a secure remote portal.
That's a good point, because that does come up frequently with the expense along the lines of getting their own e-discovery server or services and licensing to come along with that. So Emilio, since we have this and we host it, what financial, if you wanted to call it, incentive, or how does that help our smaller firms or mid-sized firms who can't afford to get their own iPro servers? How does this help them that we have it hosted and we can provide it for them?
Well, because we license the software and we own our servers and storage and backups, we can offer competitive rates. a lot of the secretaries will do their own review. They have 1,000 emails they have to go through. They get PST files, all of the time, and they manually go through them because their attorneys don't want to pay for the eDiscovery service. Well, they're still actually paying someone to manually go through them. And if it takes them a week, they could have been doing something else, especially if they're passing this bill off to the client anyway. It makes more sense to use iPro.
Sure. It'd be much more efficient as well, instead of manually perusing through a PST file in Microsoft Outlook and accidentally manipulating the data or something else like that. So yeah, so here we're talking about the technology to do it, right? What else is involved?
I wanted to jump in and say one thing really quickly. Sophisticated clients expect e-discovery costs. This is not anything new. This has been 10 plus years. So, firms shouldn't be naive in thinking their clients are going to be upset when they're approached. They actually expect you to have this discussion with them early on in the case, and they appreciate it. So that is a known cost to clients who litigate, that there will be e-discovery costs. And we definitely can keep our costs with the services we provide at a much significantly, sometimes lower rate than you would experience with a big time player in the e-discovery vendor market.
Now that's interesting. You mentioned that, Betty, and Emilio had noted on this too, is your clients kind of expect you to have this type of service. We're thinking it might be too expensive or it's too complex, but then our clients are thinking about this. I think
Yes.
Do I remember you mentioning an example, without mentioning any names, where that had happened?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being involved in a case, and one of the things I've always been a fan of is to sit down with the partner, with the associates in the matter, the paralegal, the secretaries at the beginning of the case, and try to have a discussion about what the e-discovery might look like, especially from the defense standpoint. You can see what's being asked of you by the plaintiff initially at the complaint level, kind of the scope of what the case is going to be about. And I remember one time an attorney tried to keep everything in-house on a large case, and it just reached a point that it was becoming impossible to maintain. We didn't even have the storage. And so I went to the partner and had this discussion, and we had already obtained some quotes, and they were very expensive. This was a case with a lot of data. And I sat through the conference call with the partner and the client, and the client said, "I was waiting for this call, and I didn't understand why you didn't bring it up in the very beginning, because we knew this was going to be a very expensive case in terms of e-discovery." So I just want to remind law firms to never underestimate the sophistication of their clients, especially if they're often involved in this type of casework.
Very interesting. Good real world example. Now, Emilio, you had mentioned in going back to our conversation before, that if there is one key part that typically gets left out when this whole process will start, you had mentioned it'll kind of start out small and then it gets more complex. If you had to offer one piece of advice in doing e-discovery work, what would that be?
Give us the full scope of work up front, so we know what we're looking at. We know where you need to be, and let us help you try to get to that point.
Very good. Good. That makes sense. That way you know how to help. It's knowing all that up front. Now, how has all of this worked out? You got the iPro, you got the technology. We're talking about scope and costs. Are clients enjoying using iPro Eclipse platform, and when you've had e-discovery and litigation things that have gone on? How's that? So that's one question. Then the other part is, how has it worked with this whole pandemic thing? Are you able to do the same type of work? Has it altered how it works, or maybe increased the amount of work?
We have had good response with our eDiscovery platform. We have a few ongoing cases, always kind of going on the server. And in between those, we'll get some pieces of work that actually we provide the service on, where the legal secretaries or paralegals aren't actually working on it. It may be a small set of documents that need to be produced, base stamped, and you know, information redacted. Small jobs that we can just produce for the client and get it back out to them. As far as the pandemic goes, everything is really remote for us. You know, so I haven't seen much of a change there. You know, training is remote. You know, the servers are all remote. When we set them up, it's remote. So not really an increase or a decrease there. I did notice that, you know, originally when the courthouses shut down for a bit, things kind of postponed for a short amount of time, and some of the work was paused. But once they started opening the courthouses back up, everything kind of picked back up, you know, and then, you know, more forensic work came in, and, you know, it's kind of just been nonstop since then.
Wow. That's really kind of reshaped everything. Of course, like you said, the technology's been around, but now that it's really starting to take off with the way things have been working or operating since the pandemic. Now, well, just for our audience, essentially what you really need is an Emilio Flores. Let's just be honest here. Betty and I were talking about this, and Emilio is not really one to talk about himself. But he has become an incredibly important person to many of our clients who've had to deal with eDiscovery and working with custodians and gathering EIS and imaging servers and et cetera, et cetera. And he helps to do all that. Now, that's not the only service that he provides, is being able to be the mediator between this and explain this technology. Emilio, just to kind of put the spotlight on some of the other work that you do, in addition to the eDiscovery, what else have you been doing or focused on?
So in forensic work, you know, unless it's a laptop or a desktop, I'm going on site. Most of the server work is done after hours, depending on what it is. You know, if we have to image a server, they have to be shut down to properly image them. So depending on the server, what it is, you know, the process can run a few hours to, you know, I've had one run 2 days, or 2.5 days. So we started it on a Friday night. I ran back down there Sunday, it was still running. Went back Monday morning at like 5 in the morning, it was still running. And, you know, it finally finished around, you know, 10. And we got them up and running. There's not really much I can do about that. It's not really a software thing. You know, it's the data transfer speeds are, you know, hardware related.
Right, they're what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, you know, I'll try to get a solid state drive and minimize some of that downtime by, you know, getting the best hardware available will allow us to kind of minimize that. And it may seem like it's a little bit more expensive on the hardware side, but in the long run, you're paying, you know, less time, you have less downtime.
Very nice. Well, very good. Well, thanks for doing a good job with that and setting a good reputation for yourself on it, for sure. Now, Betty, that's not the only thing we have here to talk about. This little word, this little acronym, PST files. Oh my.
Yeah, pretty much. Ever since PST files showed up in our life, which is just a type of file format where you export emails out of Outlook. You can export them as a CSV file, comma, separated value, or a PST file. And everyone wants the PST file because that allows you to see the Outlook structure of the folders and the emails contained therein, etc. But secretaries often want to add a PST file to their own Outlook to print those emails. And it's always just been the time I want to scream, no, at the top of my
Right.
lungs and make sure everybody's listening. But of course, secretaries have an attorney telling them, please hurry, get this done, print these emails so I can review them. And I just really want Emilio to touch on why that isn't a good idea. And then I also want you to show them why, what an email header contains, where that is the true data that we're looking at when we review it in a eDiscovery scenario. We have access to that. So I just love Emilio to chime in on that with me.
Yeah, so it's always a bad idea to manipulate, some of this information that you have to produce on your computers because it changes the metadata. And if we can, we want to try to avoid that, because if you're producing this information and somebody needs to use a hash value to confirm its validity, then it may not match the original that was produced from the server later on down the road. The applications that we use don't adjust this metadata, and when it's ingested in the system, the metadata is pulled, on the back end, and it's kept separate from the actual document that you mark up. So when we do produce it, we can also export the metadata and the hash values for, the entire data set or particular items that we're looking at.
So we're looking, we're
We're
looking at an email header right here, which, all of us live in email all day, but I guarantee most attorneys and secretaries don't know how to get to this information in their email or really what it means. But it is essentially the story of when and where the email started, the servers it went through to be delivered to the next stop, etc. And, if somebody was to just ask for emails produced as a PDF, they're really denying themselves seeing that actual true documents and the process it went through. And I hate to say it, but I don't like to think anybody would do that. But you can easily edit the body of an email, and you would never know if that happened if you weren't asking to have documents produced to you in native format, and maybe in addition to PDF. But for sure, I would always ask for native format in that situation as well.
So yeah, so it also, it also can change on how the information is collected. So, if the custodian is collecting it themselves, they may not collect all of the data that's needed or all of the metadata. There's specific ways that items need to be collected, and everything varies from the software type to the file type.
Right.
Some of our competitors have subcontracted me to collect, forensic images from different servers or different cloud storages. I've had to collect images from Azure servers for one of our large competitors because they didn't have the technical knowledge of Azure, blobs or containers or APIs, or even how to collect this information on the back end. We don't just have the knowledge and the tools to conduct a forensic investigation, but we also have the technical aptitude to understand the server functionality, both on-prem and in the cloud at a high-end level.
That's an important part.
Yeah, I was just before, Emilio led right into this topic because he gets the whole big picture. But data collection, I'm always shocked how infrequently law firms realize they can send a custodian in to another the opposing party's office and have access to servers, have access to the data instead of asking that custodian to produce it to you. And that's exactly what Emilio's talking about. And he has the aptitude, Terrapin's in a unique position. We don't just do eDiscovery, We do meet all of your technology needs. So you have someone who actually understands these intricate infrastructures that can go in and know exactly what he's looking for and not be bamboozled into getting a flash drive of a few files and thinking, great, I have the keys to the kingdom. That's the great part of having Emilio on your team when it comes to this kind of work.
So we kind of transition. We got this, we have eDiscovery, we have the collection. We talked about the forensic part a little bit, but there's another part of this, of remote work and working with courts. We could obviously talk about the data, but then there's also the person interactions that come with doing depositions, which has taken a whole new spin since the pandemic, right, Betty?
It has. And I wanted to speak about this a little bit. There were times that I saw remote depositions being taken. Usually it involved a deponent on the opposite side of the country, or perhaps even in a foreign country, and the travel expense was just too much. And people would reluctantly agree to this approach. But now, in 2020, and I don't see it ending anytime soon, almost all depositions are being conducted remotely. And you have some options. You can have the court reporter be remote or in the room with the deponent. The videographers involved. I've actually seen some depositions taken in 2020 where you can tell they did the professional setup with the lighting, but you can also get a great quality using the web camera on your laptop or a separate web camera. That's how depositions are being conducted right now. And this picture is a good image of how it works. You can actually have the document, the exhibit. Anyone who's involved in depositions know the length of exhibits is long. You're discussing documents called exhibits in a deposition, and this is all comes packaged. The other thing that court reporting firms have had to get up to speed on is making sure that their law firm clients end up with you get a video file and you get a deposition transcript. Bringing those two together was always a pain point. In years past, you either had to hire a new vendor to synchronize them, or you had to buy your own software and train someone. Now it literally comes that way to you, and it comes with like a third-party program you don't pay money for. And what's the point of all that? So you can easily make clips of testimony to insert into closing arguments, opening statements, arbitration statements, hearings. This is how you can now bring the visual and the audio of this deponent giving their answers in a sworn testimony to the courtroom and to these other areas where we have hearings.
Great. So that takes us to another question then. So you have your depositions, you're doing your diligence there and preparing, but then what about the actual hearing? This is very interesting where you have virtual hearing assistants. Now, Betty, you and Emilio have both had some recent work in helping clients prepare for arbitration.
Yeah.
Maybe Emilio, maybe you could start off tell us a little bit about how that worked.
Benjamin handles the telco division of Terrapin. And so we are kind of working together to provide, high-end media equipment for some of these hearings. And we did a litigation arbitration with a client. And the way we set it up, everything was great. Both parties loved it. Even the judge, was extremely happy with the setup and, offered to, write something up for us to put up on the website. The witnesses were able to join via Zoom. We had a witness station set up in the ballroom, as well as witnesses available on Zoom. Each station had its own monitor and small speaker with a mic. In between the stations, we had plexiglass set up, on some stands, and anyone who wanted to view were able to, because it was hosted on Zoom. Nobody had to travel, unless they were required to, or the attorneys on site. Another instance, I'm actually being deposed today at 2 via Zoom, and then next Wednesday or Thursday, I'm doing an expert witness testimony over Zoom as well.
Very nice.
That's
So
awesome.
very, very useful and efficient use of the technology, to say the least. Now, Betty, you had something similar, is that right?
Yeah, a similar yet different. My favorite thing to do is help attorneys prepare their opening statements and closing arguments. And, that work is continuing during the pandemic. It's just changed a little bit. So instead of going into the courtroom or going to a arbitration at somebody's office and sitting together in a conference room, again, this is being done via Zoom. But the process still remains the same. An attorney will contact me and say they'd like me to assist with this process, and they tell me a little bit about the case, send me an outline, and then they start telling me the documents that they want to show during their opening statement and the videotape deposition clips. And they give me those parameters, the page, the lines. They give me the paragraphs in each document that they want to literally have visually called out with animation, and I go to work. I start putting this all together for the attorney and work closely with them until we get it fine tuned. And then now, with the pandemic going on, we practice via Zoom. And I can tell you that you can still look into the camera using one monitor, which is best in this scenario, and just show the actual PowerPoint presentation slide with your presenter notes just below. So it looks like you're looking right into the camera and you're actually reading your presenter notes. And so we practice things like that. We practice starting and stopping the video deposition clips, because now, of course, this attorney is on their own, probably working from home. I just highly recommend you don't use Wi-Fi and you use a wired connection for your internet so you have the most bandwidth possible. And our situation was a huge success. Everything went off without a glitch.
Very nice. Very nice. So a lot to think about. We've talked about, in the kind of the beginning, you're talking about data, manipulating it and going through it. We talked about a little bit about forensic that Emilio has worked on and getting certification on. We've talked about, setting up rooms. We've talked about doing depositions and the virtual hearing assistants, whether that's physically with the equipment or virtually, or essentially with the technology and helping out with the presentation. All of these things help set a very professional look for the firm and for the attorney that's using it. Let's be honest, the people we're working with, they have high expectations, and that's not just in from a technology company, but it's also from a law firm as well. Wouldn't you agree, Betty?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the
Yeah.
great part about outsourcing to Terrapin. Instead of having someone on staff with 30 or 40 years experience doing this, you can just rent us by the hour. Works out great.
Rent an IT. I like it. Well, we have a few takeaways for you, and we can provide this checklist for you if you're interested. So here are kind of the takeaways on the main points we want you to remember. One, if you're working with eDiscovery, is to make sure to define the scope of your project, and because sometimes it can start off small and work out real complex. And make sure that whoever needs to be involved is involved from the very beginning, including your IT person or whoever is going to be working as the custodian of the data, or etc. Having the correct tools right from the get-go of what you're going to do. Is that going to be iPro? Is it not? Let's talk about it. What is the scope? How does that fit into it? And are you going to use them correctly? So just because you have a tool doesn't mean that you have the training or know how to utilize it correctly. And then, are you going to do it in-house or out? Good question. You got to feel that out as well. And then, as far as costs go, always remember to discuss that with your client early on. And then last but not least, this one was a good one, Betty, you brought up. Courts can award eDiscovery cost reimbursement, right?
They can. Not only can they award reimbursement, but I can't speak because I'm not an attorney, but they award sanctions. So many times firms in their request for production will ask for something that's incredibly overbroad. And if sometimes the work involved can exceed the expense even of the actual damages being asked for in a case. Judges are there to help work this out. They will get you reimbursed by the side who asked for all of this discovery to be performed. And attorneys that actively work in this area of law know that. So don't be afraid to, file motions, get the judge involved, and help, manage these e-discovery disputes as they're ongoing.
Very good. Well, Betty and Emilio, thank you very much for discussing those topics with us. And we appreciate everyone attending today and talking about our e-discovery and deposition challenges, especially during our pandemic, but really moving forward, it's kind of making a big change on how things are going to operate. And we think it's going to stick around for quite a long time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time, info@terrapintechnology.com. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and look at our other recordings of our webinars. Thank you very much. And we look forward to talking this out again with you and more technology for our next webinar Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.